The room smelled of sawdust and old leather. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September of 1981, and the second floor of a training facility on the east side of Burbank, California held exactly 41 people. Not 40, not 42. 41 men who had come to watch Sylvester Stallone prepare for a role that would require him to fight on screen, and to look convincing doing it. The windows faced west, and the afternoon light came in flat and yellow across the floorboards, illuminating nothing particular. A water cooler hummed in the corner, a folding table held 6 bottles and a clipboard. Stallone was 35 years old that afternoon. He had just finished principal photography on a film that would gross over $200 million. His arms were 33 inches in circumference, and he had been training with professional fighters and military consultants for the better part of 18 months. He stood 6 feet tall and weighed 214 pounds, and every pound of it was earned. He had broken his neck on a stunt. He had fractured 2 ribs. He had a standing reputation in every gym in Los Angeles as a man who trained beyond what cameras required. He was not a man playing at toughness. Everyone in that room knew it. There were among those 41 people 4 names worth noting. A stunt coordinator named Benny Dobbins, who had worked 3 Bond films, and said afterward that he had never seen anything like what happened next. A veteran trainer named Eddie Futch, 70 years old, who had cornered champions at the highest level of the sport, and who set his coffee cup down at the critical moment with a sound nobody in the room forgot. A cameraman named Rodriguez, who had come to document Stallone's training session, and who later said he put his camera down on instinct, understanding somehow that what he was about to see should not be recorded. And in the 4th row of folding chairs, partially obscured by the shoulder of the man in front of him, a man in a gray canvas jacket, the collar turned up, a plain cap worn low on his forehead, sitting with his hands folded on his knees. He had no title that afternoon. He held no clipboard. He was not on the training schedule. Nobody had introduced him. Nobody needed to. In the next 43 seconds, in front of those 41 witnesses, something would happen that the stunt community of Hollywood would discuss in careful, specific language for the next 4 decades. In 43 seconds, one of the most physically imposing men in the motion picture industry would learn the difference between the appearance of danger and the thing itself. Nobody in that room, including Stallone, understood yet what was about to begin. That is the only fact that matters right now. To understand what happened that afternoon, you have to understand what Sylvester Stallone was in 1981, not the legend, not the franchise, the man. He had come from nothing. He had written Rocky in 3 days in a locked apartment and refused to sell the script unless he could star in it. The studio had offered him $300,000 for the screenplay and wanted Ryan O'Neal to play the lead. He said no. He walked away from $300,000 with $14 in his bank account, and he was right to do it. And the film won the Academy Award for Best Picture. What followed Rocky was a career arc that had no precedent in the industry. He trained like an athlete rather than an actor. He hired boxing trainers and kickboxing consultants and spent hours in the ring absorbing real contact because he believed the camera could detect the difference between a man who had been hit and a man who had only pretended. He was not wrong about that. Directors who worked with him in that period described a man who asked for things to be done rather than simulated. A man who understood that the body carries information that cannot be faked at speed. His physical dimensions in the fall of 1981 were documented by the production team working on his next project. Chest, 50 inches. Arms, 33. He bench pressed 360 pounds. His resting heart rate was 42 beats per minute. He had been trained in Western boxing at a professional level, in basic judo and in modified Muay Thai striking. His left cross, measured on a calibrated bag during a training session filmed for a behind-the-scenes documentary, registered 197 foot-pounds of force. This was the man who held the floor that Thursday afternoon in Burbank. And the floor was his, genuinely, until the moment he made the mistake that men of exceptional physical confidence occasionally make. He made the mistake of speaking about something he had not yet encountered. It happened because a conversation started that should have remained private. Dobbins, the stunt coordinator, had mentioned in passing to a journalist the week before that the facility was being used to evaluate the practical fighting ability of several technical consultants for an upcoming project. The word had moved through the industry the way words do in small professional communities. And by Thursday afternoon, the conversation in the room had drifted from training methodology into something more pointed. Stallone was in the center of the floor, moving through combinations with a pad holder, and someone in the folding chairs said something that drew a laugh. The specifics vary depending on who tells the story, but the shape of what followed is not disputed by any of the 41 people who were there. Stallone stopped moving. He lowered his hands. He turned toward the chairs, breathing easily, and he said something that the room would remember differently than he intended. He said that the fighters he had trained with had taught him something fundamental, which was that cinema combat and real combat shared almost nothing in common. He said that he had sparred with professional boxers, had worked with military personnel, and had come to understand that the kind of fighting shown in most martial arts films was theatrical. Beautiful, he said, but theatrical. He said that movies made fighters look like something they were not in practice. He said that screen time and real time were different things. He said this clearly, and he meant it earnestly, and it was not entirely wrong as an observation. But the specific way he said it, the specific words he chose, moved through the room and reached the fourth row of folding chairs and landed on the man in the gray canvas jacket. He said, "Movies do not make fighters, they make performances." Eddie Futch, the old trainer in the corner, later said that the temperature in the room did not change. That is how he described it. He said, the temperature did not change, but something else did. Something he could not name. The man in the gray jacket did not shift in his seat. He did not look up immediately. He sat with his hands folded on his knees for a period of time that two separate witnesses estimated at between 4 and 6 seconds. Then he stood up. If you are watching this channel for the first time, this is the moment to subscribe. Press that button now. Leave a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. Because what that man in the gray jacket did next in front of 41 professional witnesses is exactly the kind of story that brought every single one of us here. Do not let the algorithm take you somewhere else before you see how this ends. Charles Ray Norris was 41 years old that September. He stood 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 182 pounds. And both of those numbers were unremarkable in a room full of physically exceptional men. He was not the largest person present. He was not the youngest. He was wearing street clothes, the gray canvas jacket, a white t-shirt beneath it, dark trousers, flat-soled shoes with no particular support. He was not dressed for a gymnasium. What he had, which could not be seen in any particular way from across a room, was this: a professional fighting record of 183 matches across a span of competitive years in which he had never lost a championship bout. He held a 6th-degree black belt in Tang Soo Do. He held black belts in 2 additional disciplines. He had been the middleweight karate champion of the world for 6 consecutive years. He had trained United States military personnel in hand-to-hand combat at the request of the Department of Defense. He had taught Bruce Lee. That is not a figure of speech. He had personally trained Bruce Lee in the mechanics of grappling and ground control during the period when Lee was developing Jeet Kune Do, and Lee had publicly credited him by name. He had also, separately from all of that, appeared in a number of films. He stood up from the 4th row of folding chairs, and he did it without haste. He was not in a hurry. He removed his canvas jacket. He folded it once along the center seam, precisely and without looking down at his hands, and he set it on the chair behind him. He adjusted the cap on his forehead by perhaps 1 inch. He walked toward the center of the floor. The recognition moved through the room in a sequence that Dobbins described as a wave passing from front to back through water. The people in the first 2 rows saw who it was immediately and went very still. The people in the 3rd and 4th rows understood because of the stillness in front of them. The people in the back understood because of the silence. Stallone, standing in the center of the floor, watched the man approach. He had met Norris. It would be inaccurate to say they were strangers. They had been in the same industry for years, had moved through some of the same professional circles. But meeting a man at an industry function and meeting a man walking toward you across the center of a gymnasium floor are two entirely different kinds of meeting. And everyone in that room understood this without being told. The man in the white t-shirt stopped 11 feet from Stallone. The distance between them was exact. This is not an approximation. Dobbins, who spent his professional life calculating physical distances for safety reasons, said afterward that it was 11 feet, and that the choice of 11 feet rather than 8 or 14 was itself a piece of information. A man who stops at 8 feet is close enough to swing. A man who stops at 14 feet is too far to move efficiently. A man who stops at 11 feet has already calculated the exchange. He has already made a decision about the distance and the time and the angle before the first word is spoken. Norris looked at Stallone. He said 3 words. He said, "Show me something." That is what he said. Not a challenge in the theatrical sense, not a speech, not an inventory of his credentials. 3 words, spoken at a volume that carried to the front 6 rows and no further. Futch later said he knew it was over at that moment. He said he knew because of the 11 feet and because of the 3 words, and because of what was not in the 3 words there was no heat in them. A man who is angry speaks from the chest. A man who is certain speaks from somewhere quieter, and you learn with enough years in gyms to hear the difference. He said he picked up his coffee cup, then set it back down without drinking from it. What happened in the next 43 seconds requires time to explain properly, because 43 seconds in a room like that, in front of witnesses like those, is not the same as 43 seconds anywhere else. The specific 43 seconds that followed are a different unit of time than the 43 seconds on a clock. A fight is not a collision. That is the first misunderstanding most people carry into a gymnasium, and the last one they surrender. A fight is a conversation about space, who controls it, who yields it, who can take it back. The man who manages the geometry of a confrontation has already won a negotiation before a single technique is thrown. This is not philosophy. This is the practical arithmetic of physical conflict, and it is taught in every serious martial arts program in the world, and it is the thing that separates training from performance. Stallone took the first step. This was reasonable. He was on his floor, in front of his people. And he had trained seriously, and what he knew from that training was that forward pressure was a form of control. He closed the distance from 11 feet to 7 feet in one movement. Clean, committed, the movement of a man who understood forward momentum. Norris did not retreat. He moved laterally 2 steps to his left, and the movement was small enough that 3 people in the room said afterward they almost did not notice it. Almost. He was no longer at 7 feet, he was at 9 feet, and at a 45-degree angle to Stallone's right shoulder. This was second 1. Dobbins on the left side of the room had both hands flat on the folding table in front of him. He said later that he put them there not from tension, but from the instinct of a man who has staged hundreds of fights, and who recognizes in the first second whether what he is watching is staged or not. He said his hands went to the table because his body understood something before his mind had the words for it. Stallone turned and closed the angle. His movement was efficient. He had been trained in the importance of cutting angles and he executed it correctly. He was now at 6 feet, and his right side was squared. What he had given up in the turning was the precise awareness of his own left flank, and this was not visible to most people in the room, and it was not something that could be seen without knowing what to look for. Norris knew what to look for. This was second 4. The pad holder who had been working with Stallone stood 8 feet to the right and had not moved. The cameraman Rodriguez had set his camera down on his knee and was sitting very still. In the back row, a lighting technician who had come to assess the space for an upcoming shoot later said he stopped writing in his notepad at this moment, not because he decided to, but because he forgot he was holding it. Second 7. Stallone extended his left, a probing movement, testing the distance between them. It was technically sound, it reached nothing. Norris was no longer at 6 feet. He was at 8 feet, and the angle had shifted again, slightly, and the shift was subtle enough that Stallone's reach registered only air. One failed attempt. This is the part that trained observers noticed and civilians missed. Norris was not evading. Evasion is reactive. What he was doing was something prior to reaction. He was choosing the geography of the encounter before the encounter required geography to be chosen. He was not responding to Stallone's movement. He was making Stallone respond to his. Second, 11. Stallone moved again, this time with a committed step and a right-hand lead that had 197 foot-pounds behind it. Clean mechanics. Real intention. Norris slipped it. The word slip does not mean dodge. A slip is a movement of the head and the shoulder and the hip that are coordinated so precisely that the incoming technique passes within inches while the body weight shifts into a new position from which the next movement originates. It is a technique that takes years to develop until it becomes involuntary. He slipped it inside, meaning he moved towards Stallone rather than away, and for a period of approximately 1 second the two men were close enough that the distance between them could be measured in inches rather than feet. Nothing happened in that second. Norris did not throw. He let the second exist, and then he stepped back to 8 feet again. 2 failed attempts. Fudge, who had spent 50 years watching men fight and training men to fight, said afterward, "I saw it on Stallone's face at that moment. Not fear, not embarrassment, something quieter than both." He said, "I saw recognition." Recognition is harder to recover from than either fear or embarrassment, because recognition is the moment when the story a man has been telling himself about a situation meets the actual situation, and they do not match. Second, 19. Stallone set his feet. He was done testing. What he threw next was a left-right combination with full commitment. The combination that had been measured at nearly 200 foot-pounds on the bag. The combination that stunt coordinators had built entire sequence around because it was genuinely fast and genuinely hard, and had the weight of a serious athlete behind it. Norris moved his head 6 inches to the right on the first strike and then turned the second with his left forearm in a deflection that redirected rather than blocked, meaning the force of the strike went past rather than into him. The deflection was so small and so economical that Rodriguez, the cameraman, said it took him a full minute of watching the empty space afterward to understand what he had seen. 3 failed attempts. Norris was now at Stallone's left side, and the distance between them was 4 feet. He had moved from 8 feet to 4 feet in the course of the deflection, and the movement had been so compact that it appeared to several witnesses as if he had simply been at 4 feet all along. He raised his right hand, not quickly. He raised it at a speed that had nothing urgent in it, and he placed it, open palm, against the left side of Stallone's jaw at the hinge. Not a strike, a placement, a demonstration. He held it there for 2 seconds. Then he lowered it. The room was quiet for a duration that 3 separate witnesses estimated at between 8 and 12 seconds. The water cooler hummed. The afternoon light continued to fall across the floorboards, indifferent to the 43 seconds that had just elapsed. On the boulevard 2 blocks west, traffic was moving at its ordinary pace. None of it knew anything had happened. The world did not register the event. Only 41 people in a room in Burbank, California registered it, and they would register it for the rest of their lives. Norris stepped back from Stallone. He stepped back to a distance of 7 feet, and he stood there. He extended his right hand, open palm, facing up. Not a handshake, an offering. Something you extend to a man you respect, after you have demonstrated to him something he needed to know. Stallone looked at the hand. He looked at it for a moment that Dobbins described as no more than 3 seconds, but which felt considerably longer to everyone watching. Then he took it. He said something to Norris that was not meant for the room. He said it at a volume that reached Norris and did not reach the first row of chairs. 2 witnesses who were positioned close enough to have heard fragments said afterward that they agreed on one word: wrong. The other words they could not confirm. What they could confirm was the shape of what was said, which was the shape of a man revising something he had stated in public a few minutes earlier. The fork in the road arrives for everyone who stands in that position. Everyone who has been shown something they did not know, in front of witnesses, reaches it eventually. There are two directions. One is to find a technical explanation, a reason why the specific circumstances were unusual, a reason why what happened does not mean what it appears to mean. The other is to say, I understand now something I did not understand before. Stallone stood at that fork for 3 seconds, which is longer than it sounds when everyone in the room is watching. He chose the second direction. He said something further to Norris, again below the room's hearing, and Norris nodded once. Then Norris walked back toward the fourth row of folding chairs. He picked up his canvas jacket. He folded it over his left arm. Rodriguez, the cameraman, was standing now, and Norris passed close enough to him that Rodriguez took a half step to the right. Norris touched his shoulder once, briefly, with his right hand in passing, and kept walking. At the door he paused. He turned back to the room. He found Stallone's eyes across the 40 feet of open floor, and the 41 people between them. He said something that carried this time. It was 6 words, and Futch and Dobbins and the lighting technician and Rodriguez all agreed on what those 6 words were, and not one of them forgot them for the rest of their lives. He said, "Films are not what you think." And then he left. The story did not stay in that room. Stories like this never stay in the rooms where they happen, because the rooms where they happen are full of people who carry them outward into other rooms, other gyms, other conversations, and each time a story moves through a person, it acquires something, and loses something, and arrives somewhere different than it left. Dobbins told a version of it on a film set in New Mexico 6 months later. Futch mentioned it to a journalist doing a profile on his career in 1987, though the journalist cut the passage. The cameraman Rodriguez told it to his brother-in-law, who was not in the industry, and who told it to people who simplified it further. By 1985, the version in circulation had Stallone conceding something dramatic and specific. By 1990, some versions had the encounter happening on a film set rather than a training facility. By 2004, a version existed in which the 43 seconds had become 4 minutes. This is what oral history does. It keeps the emotional truth and renegotiates the physical facts. The people who were there know what they saw. Everyone else knows a version of what they saw. Both the original and the version serve a purpose. What is not disputed by anyone who was present is the essential shape of the event, that one of the most physically serious men in the motion picture industry had made a public claim about the nature of trained fighters, and that 43 seconds later he had understood something about that claim that he had not understood before. Stallone did not speak about that afternoon for a considerable number of years. When he eventually mentioned Norris in public contexts, he did so in a register of specific and deliberate respect that people who knew him recognized as genuine rather than promotional. He did not elaborate on the particulars. He did not need to. Men who have been shown something by another man know what they owe that man and the way they speak about him afterward. The tone of what Stallone said was the payment. Norris continued training for the rest of that decade and into the next at a level that no camera was required to document. He gave nothing to the myth except what he could not help giving, which was the testimony of everyone who had stood in a room with him and understood something afterward that they had not understood before. Dobbins said in a 2009 interview that almost nobody read, that what he witnessed in Burbank in September of 1981 remained in his estimation the most economical demonstration of real physical intelligence he had encountered in 40 years of professional work. He said, there was no drama in it. That was the drama. Eddie Futch died in 2001. In the final interview he gave, a long conversation conducted at his home in Las Vegas, he was asked to name the most instructive moment of his career, meaning the moment that taught him something he applied from then on. He mentioned 3 things. The third thing was a room in Burbank, and a man in a gray jacket and 43 seconds. He said, I learned that afternoon that certainty and ability are 2 entirely different things, and that the man who knows the difference between them does not need to announce it. He said, he just needs to stand up. There is one thing a moment like that Thursday in Burbank teaches, if you are willing to receive it. It teaches that the stories we tell about what we can do, and the things we can actually do at speed under real conditions, in front of real witnesses, are written in different languages. One is told in words, in interviews, in public declarations. The other is told in the 11 feet between two men, and in the 43 seconds that follow. A man does not become what he says he is in the moment of saying it. He becomes what he is in the moments when saying is no longer available to him. In those moments, the distance is all there is. Stallone understood this. He understood it in 3 seconds at a fork in the road in front of 41 witnesses, and his choice of direction in those 3 seconds is the most important thing about the afternoon. He had been a man of genuine ability and exceptional commitment, who had made a claim that exceeded his knowledge, and when the knowledge was provided to him, he accepted it. That is not a small thing. Most men never accept it. They find the technical explanation, they find the unusual circumstance. They go home with the claim intact, and the knowledge refused. He did not do that. That is the story. That is the part that matters. Next week we are going to tell you what happened the afternoon that a 3-time world heavyweight champion walked into a Hollywood stunt gym and told a group of coordinators that everything they were teaching was wrong, and why 6 minutes later he was sitting on the floor revising that opinion. That story starts in an aircraft hangar in Chatsworth in 1979, and it involves 4 witnesses. One decision made in under 5 seconds, and a sentence that one of those witnesses had tattooed on his forearm the following spring. We will see you then.